Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
We've got a guest today that has been introduced to us through a close friend of ours. But Jason, who do we have coming on?
Well, Scott, we have the owner of what's called Pillar to Post Home Inspectors. It is a home inspection franchise in Idaho. As everybody knows, I'm from Idaho. I was born and raised in Idaho. And so anybody that's in Idaho has got to be pretty good. That's just what I said. However, in finding out a little bit about our guest, he was born in New York City. Unfortunately, his parents moved out west, and he spent quite a bit of his life in Idaho. He's had all kinds of different jobs. He's basically worked his whole life for himself. You know, when he was a kid, he had a window washing and a lawn mowing operation, and then he got into some drywall contracting and done a lot of different things. I'm really excited to talk to him because he's had all kinds of experience of what it means to be an entrepreneur. So, welcome to our podcast, the Master Your Millions podcast. Bill Berry, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit. We started to say a minute ago before we started, you were born in New York City. How did you get to Pocatello? Well, I think it's Blackfoot. How did you get to Idaho?
Well, actually, it's in Pocatello. I was born in New York City, and then as time went on, we slowly but surely moved west. And I consider myself raised in Los Angeles, California. When I was in high school, the options for college was the local community college or something else. And I chose something else, and I ended up going to a place called Snow College in right smack dab in the middle of Utah. And that's how I became acquainted with the Intermountain West. After college, I went back to California, and one of the gentlemen that I worked with in the drywall trade started a business and moved to Blackfoot, Idaho. And he begged me to come up and says, Bill, all I can get to work for me are drunks and dopers. Please come up. And unfortunately, that's pretty typical in the drywall trades. But that's how I came to Idaho, and I moved to Idaho in the late 70s. So I've been here for close to 50 years.
Almost makes you native.
Well,
So
that's
tell
what
us
they
how.
tell me.
Tell us, how is it that, what events, if you will, that could happen in life that caused you to finally start out on your own and become an entrepreneur?
I really, as you think about it, being an entrepreneur, I think, is a mindset. And I've known lots of people that, because they were good craftsmen and tradesmen, decided to branch out on their own, but they weren't good businessmen and failed miserably. And so I don't think it was a conscious decision for me. I think more than anything, it was, I just really didn't like working for other people. Even though it's probably advantageous to, I just couldn't bring myself. At one point in time, oh boy, things were really tough. And so I decided to put a resume out and work for somebody. And I went through the interview process with 3M Company, and there was 3 or 4 interviews involved, and it came right down to it. And they called me up over the weekend and says, hey, congratulations, Bill, we're going to offer you the job. And I said, I'm sorry, I just can't bring myself to do it. And, there's lots and lots of opportunities out there. Kind of, if you have that mindset, it's almost kind of like being like a kid in a candy store. There's so many choices. And this may really sound silly, but I kind of think it started off when I was a little kid. I got a paper route, and you don't work for the paper, you're an independent contractor. And from there, I noticed, one of the things I noticed, that there was a lot of kids that would work a week delivering papers and couldn't do it. Couldn't do it, would quit. Work a month, couldn't do it, and quit. And then there was just a few of us that could work for several years, because if it was to be, it was up to me. In other words, we didn't get paid by the hour. We didn't get paid by the paper. We got paid by how much we collected. And so from there, then I remember in high school, my friends would say, "Oh, I can't go do this. I can't find a job. I don't have any money." When you're 16, all the jobs out there, you need to be 18. When you're 18, all the jobs you need to be 21. But I didn't go that route. If I needed money, I'd go down to the store and buy a bottle of Windex and a roll of paper towels, and start knocking on doors, asking people if they needed their windows washed. And so I always had money, and that frame of mind just kind of stuck with me. There's only been 2 or 3 times in my whole life where I've actually worked for somebody by the hour.
You said that at the beginning that you think being an entrepreneur is a mindset. Is that kind of tell me a little bit more about that? What you think that mindset is? Can you define it a little bit more, so someone listening and saying, "Hey, I have that mindset. I should start my own business," or
Yeah,
tell me a little bit more what you
I
think.
do believe there's the old story about, what would you rather have? Would you rather have, 1 penny doubled a day for 30 days, or would you rather have $8,000 up front? So many people would rather have the $8,000 up front because they're looking for security. Well, if you're an entrepreneur, you're not looking for security. I'll tell you that. When we started, at one point in time, for 25 years, we owned a Perkins family restaurant franchise. And when I was setting that franchise up, naturally, one of the things we did is went to the SBA and applied for a loan. And the loan officer said, "Do you know what the 2 most riskiest occupations that we lend to are?" And I said, "Well, let me guess, restaurateurs." And he says, "Absolutely. You know what the second one is?" And that's construction workers. And that's what I was. And so without even knowing, I just happened to gravitate towards the 2 most riskiest businesses out there, according to the SBA. But the point is that they were businesses that afforded you some freedom. And they were businesses that, if you enjoy working on your own, if you enjoy that mindset that I mentioned earlier, if it's to be, it's up to me. If you can buy into that, then being an entrepreneur is something you should look into. And as I've said, there's opportunities everywhere you turn. Some people think of, when they think of being an entrepreneur, they think of Elon Musk. He's the ultimate entrepreneur, but 99% of all other entrepreneurs are just like me. We're just middle-class guys that like to do their own thing. If you like to do your own thing, don't be afraid.
So you grew up, it sounds like, learning this mindset. learning this mindset of it's on me. I have the control, I have the power to succeed or lose. So, was there anything in particular that earlier in your life that taught you that, or was it a forced skill that you learned? Did it come naturally to you?
You know, I got thinking about that, you know, and I have to tell you, my father was a government worker, and the government worker is the ultimate person that seeks for security. And so I didn't learn it from my dad. I didn't. My mother was a an immigrant from Germany. She and my mom, she and my dad met after the war, and she immigrated. And so it's possible that I got something from her, simply because I can't even imagine how tough that would be to leave your family and come to a country that you just spent years fighting. But to answer your question, I don't think there was any one thing or anything that anybody that mentored me along those lines. It was just something that happened.
Okay. So it's funny you say that, because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs are naturally that way, although I know others who had to force learn that. As you've gone along, has your perspective changed at all? Or are there other viewpoints in your mindset that have had to shift to make you the man you are today, or make you as successful as you've been?
You know, absolutely. If you don't shift along with time, then something is probably wrong. For 28 years, I was a drywall contractor, and 15 of those years, I was also a building contractor. And those things afforded us a pretty good lifestyle. But when I decided not to, when I decided to change out of the construction industry, I realized that after 28 years, I have absolutely nothing to sell. I've got a few buckets and a few ladders and maybe a piece of scaffolding or something like that. And I thought, what a waste. I'm never going to go into another business where I can't create something to sell afterwards. And so everything that I've done since that time, and that's been almost 20 years ago, then I retired from the construction industry. I decided that everything that I do will have a value at the end of it. And so we operated, I had some partners, and we put together the restaurant franchise, the Perkins Family Restaurant franchise, with the sole in mind that we were going to operate it for 25 years. And at the end of 25 years, we were going to sell it. And one of the most important parts of it is that we own the land and building. I built the building, we own the land, and at the end of 25 years, the building and land was paid off. And that was really fortunate, because when the 25 years was up and our franchise license was up, guess where we were? We were right in the middle of COVID. Not a lot of interest in buying restaurants during COVID.
No, not at all.
But like I said, it all worked out fine, because the land and building was paid for, and we ended up selling that. And so that fulfilled part of my idea of never having anything that couldn't sell. And from there, I partnered up with my CPA, and we came down to Utah, came down to Salt Lake, And we went down there because we felt like the water was deeper. And we started a tax accounting firm. Now, my partner processed the work, and I beat the bushes and brought the work in. We went down there and we opened up the doors with 0 clients. Now, I don't recommend that to anybody, but we did open up the door with 0 clients, but it was a calculated risk because we had already done some test marketing here in Idaho and knew that our system would work. And within a year and a half, we had so many clients, we didn't know what to do with it all. And my partner was wanting to come back to Idaho. And once Idaho's in your blood, it's it's in your blood. And we sold it. And we sold it for what we thought, for a year and a half being in business, for a tidy sum. And so now he came back to Idaho. I stayed in Utah, and what do I do now? And so one of the things that we've talked about in the past is simply being in the construction trade. I was also active in the real estate trade, buying and selling real estate, flipping houses, so on and so forth. And so it was, once the accounting office was sold, it was just a natural progression to get a real estate license and start doing the same thing down in Utah. But then guess what happens? 2008 comes along and the market drops right out of real estate sales. So here again, I know lots of agents that were starving to death and didn't know what to do, had no clue what to do. But because of that entrepreneurial mindset, I just started looking around and there's got to be an opportunity here someplace. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, I've got this rental house that I can't get rented. And I know you've had some experience in this. Can you figure this out for me?" And so she had a property management company that was handling it for her and just not doing the job. So I went back to her and says, "You know what we ought to do? We ought to start a property management company." And the whole idea was, at first, was to supplement whatever we might be able to make in real estate. But after a couple of years, it just took off, and 6 years later, we ended up selling it. We had 180 doors under contract, and here again, it was incredible. We sold that for a nice tidy sum also. And so
I really like this, your idea that, and I'm going to paraphrase it, I think, is that you have, since early on, you have always started in a business with an exit strategy in mind. Before you ever start it, that's been discussed and that's part of your planning. That's a really good lesson that everybody needs to learn from, that they need to understand.
That was the lesson that I learned when I got out of the construction business. And that was to begin with the end in mind.
Cool. And I like that. Can you name a couple other lessons that you think you've learned from some of your failures and successes that you would say is critical to being successful as an entrepreneur?
I'm a big believer in having partners. And the reason most people hate having partners because they've had such lousy experiences with them. And I've had a few lousy experiences with partners too, but I've also had some wonderful experiences with partners. And one of the things that I learned is when you choose a partner that has a whole different skill set than you do. And so you can work together synergistically. And that's what happened with the restaurant business. That's what happened with the accounting business, and that's what happened with the property management business. And so for people out there that say, oh no, I just can't work with partners, take your time and choose the right partner, and it'll work synergistically for you. One of the other things that I learned too is while you're doing your thing, is take time to read books. I've got several books that I refer back to on a constant basis. One book was written 90 years ago, and that's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Okay, great.
Timeless.
Keep going.
Timeless.
Yeah,
Another
absolutely.
book was written 60 years ago by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Here again, timeless advice. But some of the others that I really like, are The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. The advice given in that is invaluable. The 5 Lessons by Richard Paul Evans, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The 1 Minute Manager. One of the books that I really, really like that's not very well known is a book by Jim Blasingame, and it's called Small Business is Like a Bunch of Bananas. And that has all kinds of valuable advice in it. But anyway, whether it's those or ones being written out nowadays, be a constant reader, and you'll constantly be picking up tidbits here and there.
So there's a book called Becoming Your Own Banker. Have you read that one?
No, I have not.
Okay. I really love all the different books. I haven't the Small Businesses Like Bananas. I haven't read that one. But everyone else you mentioned, I have read, and pretty sure Scott's read them too. Great advice. I mean, in my profession, what we do, I often tell people to read Rich Dad Poor Dad, or Richest Man in Babylon in particular. I like, you said timeless and invaluable, in the vernacular of the day of um, some of these advertisements it would be priceless, right?
Yeah.
But the infinite banking concept or becoming your own banker, it's all about uh, starting to think like a banker, and how we outsource by default. For most of us, by default outsource the banking function in our family finances, and we allow that to be some other entity. And the reality is that entity ends up making a lot of money off of us, and we're not able to take full advantage of everything that's coming into our life. Anyway, I recommend it to you.
Good. Thank you.
What maybe you can answer for us, what, because this whole interview has been very fascinating for the fact that on our podcast we talk about accumulating, enjoying, and passing on your wealth. And at the end of every podcast, the outro is, remember that mastering your millions all starts in your mind and with your team. Make sure they are the best. And that's what you've said. You, without any prompting from us, that's what you've basically said. That you've got to have the right mindset to start off with. You got to think the end in mind. You've got to have the right kind of education, and you've had to, have a team, have partners, people that are able to do things that you aren't able to do. With that in mind, is there one thing maybe you wish you would have done differently in your experience as being an entrepreneur?
I have a tendency, yes, I have a tendency to, I mentioned before about the little kid in the candy store, and that's me. I have a tendency to not stay as focused as I could be or should be on some of the business ventures. The best job that I've ever had was when I was in high school. I went away for the summer and I worked on a cattle ranch in Oregon. And I worked there for $30 a month. I got all the 22 shells that I could shoot, and I got room and board. And that was the best job that I've ever had because I really, really enjoyed it. And so many people work in vocations that they don't enjoy. And so it becomes difficult for them to focus with enthusiasm. And that was, frankly, that was mine in the drywall industry. We were very successful in the drywall industry, but frankly, I hated it. At one point in time, we had 27 guys working for us, and our payroll was $50,000 a month, and everybody was making money, but I really didn't like the business. So just because you can do something well doesn't mean you like it. If I was to do anything all over again, I would gravitate more towards things that I really liked.
Great advice. Appreciate that. Scott, any other questions? We're getting towards the end of our time here. It has been great, Bill, having you on the podcast. I know that too, referred to us by our mutual friend, Dr. West, and he told me, he says, you really need to interview this guy. And I've been so glad that we have brought you on, for the fact that you've laid it all out. You can go back through our, all our other episodes we've done, and there's common themes. And there's also a feeling that we have as the people need to understand some things. And you just, without any prompting, has kind of really said it. And, with your experiences, life experience and everything, you've just shown that that's the way to go. Scott, what would you say?
I think it's interesting that we have a lot of people who are on here who are in the S quadrant. They're self-employed. And it's been really fun to interview someone who has been in that S quadrant for a long time and then decided to pivot and build the sell. I guess one of the final questions I'd have for you is, when you're building to sell, what creates that asset to sell? Is there like certain departments in every business? You've got to have an accountant, you've got to have, can you give us a little breakdown of something like that?
Oftentimes it's different for different things, but typically what's creating something that can be sold is a system that somebody else can step in and operate. So many, what I saw in the construction industry is that when guys would go out on their own and they did not begin with the end in mind, they were just out there working, self-employed, but working. There's nothing to sell because people aren't doing business with XYZ company. They're doing business with Joe the owner. And so to create a business that you want to sell, you have to create a system that somebody else can take over. That is exactly what we did in the accounting business. That's exactly what we did in the property management business, and that's exactly what we're doing right now today in the pillar to post home inspection business.
Cool. Well, thank you again. Thank you. This has been fantastic. if our listeners wanted to reach out to you, how would they go about doing so?
My email is bill.berry@pillartopost.com. And that will get right to me, and I would be happy to answer any and all questions that come our way.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Guys, please remember that we will put Bill's contact down in the show notes down below. If you'd like to connect with Jason or I, make sure to also check the show notes down below, or your favorite social media platform. You can find links or find us on basically anywhere. If you did like the show, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us out. And last, remember that mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. We will catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.